maintaining this connection to your country. I think what's important for me in politics, in Lithuanian politics, is to show that it doesn't matter where you live, be it Vilnius or Vancouver, New Zealand, I don't know. You can play a role in Lithuanian life if you want to.
Hello and welcome. This is Naujokaite, and you're listening to Lithuanian Dream Podcast, a podcast exploring ideas about contemporary Lithuania. Today, we will continue the series of interviews with politicians who are running for Lithuanian Parliament. This time, we will interview Aušrinė Armonaitė. She's a member of the Seimas in Lithuania, so the Parliament of Lithuania, from 2016. And since 2019, she is a chairwoman of the Freedom Party, or in Lithuanian, Laisves Partija. As you may know, in 2019, two liberal parties appeared in Lithuanian politics. Representatives of both of these parties are running for the elections to represent us, Lithuanians living abroad. Today we will talk with Aušrinė about her own work, why she chose to be a politician, and how does it look like to be a liberal politician in Lithuania. I think it will be quite useful for anybody who is thinking of voting or just want to know about Lithuanian politics. Aušrinė, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
To start with, most of our listeners are not familiar with Lithuanian politics, and they would love to know more about liberal values in Lithuania. You were with different parties for several years already. So could you explain us how liberal values evolved in Lithuanian politics throughout the last 30 years?
Well, obviously that 30 years ago, probably the most important thing was to build a democracy and a free market economy. It's not surprising that liberal politics were focused more on economic perspective. And I think it's quite okay. It's good that we need, obviously we needed someone to advocate for economic liberty, for the private initiative, for the privatization, and so on and so forth. Then now, of course, new topics emerge. For instance, human rights issues, different kind of minority rights. At the same time, we need not, to forget this economic perspective as well, because what we've seen during the pandemic as well is that our economies are based on private initiative and private property and individual economic activity, and we need to help those people. So regarding organizations, it's not a new phenomenon in Lithuania having more than one liberal party, or at least more than one call themselves liberal. We established our party 1 year ago, and I will tell you more if our listeners would need to know more.
What are the values we are fighting now for in Lithuania? Is, different ethnicities and, as you mentioned, genders, and, what are other issues? Or maybe this issue as well is quite prominent.
Well, I think that first of all, we need to defend liberal democracy. This is quite obvious if we take a look at our neighborhood. Hungary, it's not our direct member, but still it's a very important country in Europe. Poland, our neighbor, other countries, their governments tend to forget individual liberty, tend to forget human rights issues, and are getting more and more populist. And I think that some sort of echoes, we can hear them here in Lithuanian politics as well. I think we need a strong opposition to that, strong politicians, strong liberal-minded politicians that defend freedom of speech, that defend the rule of law, the independence of judicial system, minority rights, private property at the same time, because if we take a look at these conservative populists, they tend to be not only conservative on the social issues, but also very socialist on economic issues. This is not a coincidence. So we need a strong opposition, and we are ready to be that kind of opposition here in Lithuania. Because if we take a look at our ruling majority's sort of picture, they are quite conservative on social issues, also very much populist sometimes. Well, our government is more technocratic, but still it's not about ideas. It's more about this zeitgeist that we have here in Europe and the whole Western world.
So do you have any specific examples from the past, 5 years from Lithuanian politics that would illustrate, the struggles that now Lithuania is going through?
Yeah, well, I think that it's not that significant as in Poland or Hungary, but still we have some features. So, for instance, just 3 years ago, we had a huge debate on in vitro law. This means that those couples who can't have children, they need some medical services. And I think that the government, the state has to sort of facilitate that service and to help those people that need this kind of healthcare services. So a current ruling majority, they wanted to ban this healthcare services when it comes to in vitro law. And this was the first sign that, okay, they are some sort of applying a religiously motivated approach to the public political life and their decisions. Then, of course, we had sort of very politicized investigation regarding our national broadcaster. Thankfully, to the united opposition forces, the conclusions of the investigations were not approved in the parliament. This is a victory, as I would like to put it, as a victory of democracy. But there were attempts, to politicize the process, to politicize management of the national broadcaster. And we know very well that, for instance, in Hungary, there's no independent state-run media there, or in Poland as well. So thanks to these sort of our attempt to defend it, this didn't happen here, at least not yet. So these are just two examples, but we have more. We have now, for instance, a Supreme Court, a constitutional court, because our constitution is being supervised by a court that is being called constitutional court. Not all of the countries have this. We have huge debates regarding new judges and appointing them. We had to do it 3 months ago. Politicians claim that there has to be maybe previous politicians becoming judges. I think this is insane, and it's also some sign of illiberal democracy. So, of course, we are not that famous of this kind of liberal democracy, and I think it's good, but still every day here in the parliament, as we are recording it now here in the Seimas, every day we see attempts to attack the pillars of our liberal democracy, attack our constitution that our founding fathers of our country, worked so hard to build. And not even worked so hard to build it, but also they had to defend it with their blood, for instance, in 1991 and so on.
Would you say that liberal, in the context of Lithuania, your party, Laisves Partija, means embracing tolerant social values, or is it more about free market economic? Could you try to explain it to the person who maybe doesn't come from politics? How does Laisves Partija stand in the spectrum of left and right, both economically and politically?
So yes, we are a classical liberal party, and we are very much vocal about human rights, and probably someone would put us as a social liberal party when it comes to human rights, women rights, LGBT rights, disabled people rights, and so on. However, when it comes to economy, we are very much pro-market, pro-individual initiative, less bureaucracy, less regulation, more freedom to implement your ideas, to create a job not only for yourself, but also to someone else. So it's a classical sense of liberalism. Of course, I know that these days, liberal communities, they have to unite different kind of people. And in our party, we also have lots of discussions about economics, whether we need to have, for instance, less taxes, but about the tax system in general. Of course, no one debates basic human rights issues because this is something this is in our DNA, and I think that's understandable for everybody. So I would put us as a classical liberal party. Someone would compare us to the VVD in the Netherlands or D6 and ZEX in the Netherlands. VVD is more like a center-right party, and D66 is social liberal party. So I think we may unite both of these spectrum. I call myself liberal since school, and during my study years, when I studied political science in Vilnius University and also master degree as a public policy analyst, I even strengthened my political values and attitudes. So I think this is the most coherent system. If you support an individual liberty, probably you support it both economically and socially, both ways.
But for example, in Germany, we have a Green Party and Social Democrats who would be on political side, representing, the equal rights, the human rights. But then on an economic side, they would look at, sharing the economic gains, the taxes. What do you think about, free university, or, giving some kind of money, government giving money to people? Is it something that you stand against, or, yeah?
Well, it depends on a policy proposal and a policy problem we need to solve. Probably I have to stress that we are members of European Liberal Alliance, and our fellow partners from Germany would be Freie Demokratische Partei. And I know people in that party who are actually liberal on the economic spectrum, center-right, and also quite progressive on the social spectrum. So, free universities or free stuff for everybody, there's no such thing as free stuff. So someone will have to pay. We have to look at the priorities. And regarding education, this is top priority for our party. We even made a survey of our members. We were asking them, what do you think we should work in the first place? So education was top policy priority for our members, and I'm very happy about that, because I think that we would solve many problems when it comes to economy or human rights issues. We may solve many things when we start looking at school, and when we will start, proper education reform.
So what draw you as an individual to fight for these values and actually dedicate your life for the causes? Which parts of the goals do you feel the most passionate about?
Yeah, so I joined politics quite early. It's my first mandate. I am one of the youngest members of the parliament. However, it's not my first political position. I started my professional political career in Vilnius City Council as a city councillor. So what I saw, now it's been like 4 years or even more, like 5-6 years when I'm in politics, both local and national. What I saw is that it's really possible to change things. You may be not very well known, you may be not really rich, or your party is not as influential, but still you may change the direction of things that are going on. Sometimes it's very difficult to do that, sometimes it's slowly, you would like to have it faster and so on. But if you're not there, then someone, actually the opposite, would take over. So this is why I am here, and I already saw some real results of my actions, in the parliament, the same in vitro law, the same with other things that were implemented. It's possible to have results, and I think that this is the most motivating thing to stay here. Because if you feel that you're useful, then this is the best present you can get from your efforts that you're taking. And I chose that. No one invited me here. No one, pushed me here. I chose this path, and I'm really happy to go to take it. So we have lots to do here in Lithuania to make this country a happy place to everybody, to have it as Western as possible in a good way, because we know that Western world is also now encountering difficulties and problems, and its values are being attacked. But still, Lithuania is a part of the Western world now, and we need to defend it, to maintain it, and also to become a success story.
What do you think is still needed to be done on a policy level that we could say that now we did big changes?
So I would go straight to any school here in Lithuania, and we need to start changing it there. So, for instance, many people here, and actually everywhere when it comes to education, politics of education, many people discuss management and economy, but not real education. So we need to take a look what's going on in our schools. We need to put attention not only to good achievements and results of our pupils, but also how do they feel at school. If they have special requirements, if they need some more specific attention, is it inclusive enough? So when everybody feels herself or himself at school, if they are not bullied at, then probably they will create something really impressive. If we look at the 21st century, it's obvious that we need more skills when it comes to information technologies. And our party, we want to teach ICT not as a separate subject, but as a language. So our Lithuanian school children who would graduate from our schools, they could speak not only Lithuanian, English, German, French, or any other foreign language, but also IT as language. It has to be taught not only as a separate thing, but also in music or math, geography, in every subject, so that we would apply it everywhere. And I think this pandemic has shown us that this is really important, not only because our children, they are used to play with these phones, but not really using them as their tool of education or improvement. Then at the same time, teachers didn't know how to use these applications, and some children even laughed at their teachers who couldn't, apply ICT tools to the teaching process. So we need to be advanced in this way, and I think this is very important. Then not only ICT at schools, but also broader perspective, probably a bit more philosophy, a bit more world literature, a broader perspective to our children. We need to show them more of the world, let's say. So I think this is also quite important. So I would go straight to the school and make changes there, strengthening some parts of our curricula, strengthening skills of our teachers, teaching ICT or coding or any other IT technique as a language, and also putting more attention to how our children feel in schools, because we really need to address that, as our children's bullying statistics shows that Lithuanian children are being bullied the most in the OECD, among the OECD countries.
Yeah, Yeah, for sure. But it's quite brave of you to choose this as one of the main goals, because as we might know, in politics, education is always not the thing that politicians go for, because simply you can see the effect in like 6 years. They always try to go for something easy, so then they could
Yeah.
just show it before next election, which is amazing that you are thinking about it, because education is our future for sure. But then the question would be, how could you change that? It's about the institution itself, and it's about the teachers, as you said. I come from 5 generations of teachers and really know that this institution decreased its popularity just because the salaries, the respect from the students, and the level of education as well. Like we all know that University of Education in Lithuania for several years didn't have very good name. How would you change that? Because I believe it's inherent already in
Yeah.
the system.
Yeah, so that university with bad reputation is it's already gone, which is a good thing. And I think we need a more flexible education for teachers, because having one separate university, some sort of a monopoly of educating teachers, this was not a really good and healthy thing for our education system. So if we had more universities, a more flexible education, if, for instance, you may be a good scholar, but you can't teach at school, actually, if you don't have a particular study. So those studies may be a bit more flexible. So that's how we'll get to reach those people who would like to teach children, but now there are certain obstacles for them to do that. Then at the same time, we have teachers that, well, I will put it very straightforward. I will be straightforward, that hate people. They hate children. So I think that the evaluation of their work, it has to be also quite important when it comes to evaluating their results and the attitudes towards children. Salary is not the last thing to do. Having less bureaucracy in our education system would let us raise salaries for our teachers. So yeah, I think these are the first steps. And as you said, I think it's a brilliant input of yours that it's very hard to achieve. It's not like 1 year thing to do, but the decisions would enhance these things, they may be made in the very first years in the government. However, now what we experienced the past 3.5 years of this current government is a lack of leadership. Not only lack of leadership, but actually just simply they don't really care about education. I don't see that this is priority for them. So these ministers that we had in this government, in education ministers, we had 2 of them. So they are not vocal. They are not taking initiative. They are not backing the reforms. They are not defending their program. Sometimes they have good ideas that are being killed by their party in the parliament. So you have to strive for your program. They are not doing that, and I think this is the problem, because they are not real politicians. They are people that were asked to become ministers. So we have to change that.
And what about other issues that global Lithuanian community is facing? So these are the Lithuanian schools abroad, strengthening them because they need a budget as well as dual citizenship. And then there's another problem, but it's not directly related to Lithuanians abroad, but vice versa, which means the Polish in Lithuania and their surnames being written in their language. So what do you think? Is it going to progress with the next parliament? Can we see the progress in these three things, or is it still going to remain on hold for the next years?
So we are working on that to change that. The very last thing about names and passports, names in the passports, I think it's very important not only to the Polish minority here, but also to families that are international already. For instance, a lady marries some foreigner and she changes her name. So of course she wants to have her name in the original letters. So I can't see it as an international policy question. I think it's our domestic thing, because sometimes this particular issue is being raised when it comes to the Polish-Lithuanian relations. So I think it's solely our domestic question, and it has to be solved. When it comes to multi-citizenship, well, we need a second referendum. This is how our constitution may be changed. This is the only way. And I think that last year we had a great result. A huge number of people said yes to more flexible interpretation and, an option for people to have more than one passport. However, I think that politicians didn't do enough. Many of them said that I'm in favor of dual citizenship or multi-citizenship. I'm in favor of that. But they didn't campaign at all. I mean, I organized discussions and conferences in Vilnius, Kaunas, and other cities. I wanted to attract, local people who live here, because the majority of voters, they vote here in Lithuania. So we needed, to tell them that, okay, this is very important that you come and vote for the change of our constitution. So, but not many politicians did the same. Even those who, for instance, were candidates for the presidential position and so on. In some of the discussions, they said that, yes, I'm in favor of that, I will vote yes, but they didn't campaign, they didn't they haven't tried to persuade people, and they didn't do enough. So we need more leadership. Regarding education, I think it's in some places it works very well. And this thanks to the great initiative of Lithuanian families who live abroad. Maybe Lithuanian government could help, with digital solutions, for instance, having some sort of recommendations, like also books or applications that would help teach children Lithuanian language and tradition and songs and everything.
So what do you think is the role of global Lithuanians in shaping Lithuania's future? How can we contribute in supporting the ideas that can bring us to the next, decade in a more progressive way, maybe?
Well, Lithuanian diaspora was always, for ages, very important to Lithuanian life and to Lithuania's future, and I think it will be the same in the future. So, of course, everybody who lives abroad and calls him or herself a Lithuanian is an official ambassador, as you said in your letter to me, that this podcast is being listened by unofficial ambassadors of Lithuania. So I think being a good ambassador is the biggest thing one could do for Lithuania. And of course, maintaining this connection to your country. I think what's important for me in politics, in Lithuanian politics, is to show that it doesn't matter where you live, be it Vilnius or Vancouver, New Zealand, I don't know. You can play a role in Lithuanian life if you want to. And Lithuania has to do something, and I think we already done a lot, but still there has to be more things to be done. So probably electronic services, so that our state services would be, easy to reach from anywhere in the world. Many services are already provided from the distance, but still not all of them. I would like to see more. So this is just an example. And also having, a separate member of parliament. Now, this is in these upcoming elections, we will have a member of parliament dedicated to the diaspora. I think this is very important because then you could travel and communicate with people living abroad, telling what's going on, issuing your works that your results as a member of parliament, what you have achieved or didn't. So I think this is also very important, and it would help to maintain this connection.
And you mentioned bullying in schools as well, just to come back to that point. I was thinking, what do you think is the solution? Does it come from micro or macro level? Is it something that we should start practicing more as a culture, or look at it and say that there's something to be solved within, how we communicate with each other, and therefore the schools represent that? Or is it something inherent within the education system itself and nowhere else?
Someone called me and I didn't hear the beginning of your question.
Yeah. So coming back to the education system in Lithuania and bullying in schools, do you think this problem exists just in schools, or this is something that is about our culture? And is there something we should change on a micro level or on a macro level, in the sense that we should start from ourselves, or is it the policy level?
Well, I think it's both. It's a two-way street. It's both. Some people, like children, they don't have any prejudices before they come to the school. For instance, they don't know, bad words, or they have any thoughts or prejudices regarding people who look differently or are different. But then sometimes this being among certain people, sometimes they build these prejudices. So sometimes it happens in schools, sometimes it happens in families. And this is a very complex thing to do. Then some politicians who don't want to do anything, and for instance, our prime minister or some other of his colleagues, they say that, okay, bullying is very difficult problem here, but look at us. We're bullying at each other, and so on and so on. So this is the point where you need to show your leadership, saying that, okay, there are different kind of people and everybody is equal and everybody has to be treated equally. It doesn't matter who you are, where you come from, and so on. But no one tells that here, at least for 3.5 years. So if a very influential politician in a very high position in the government would, make a statement, probably it would impact some certain, some certain. It would have an impact in the society, in a broader spectrum of society. Then at the same time, if we will have, just politicians talking and doing nothing in our schools, probably we won't achieve any different changes or differences. So I think that this is a two-way street, and we need leaders, we need leadership, we need to tell people that it's okay to be different and everybody is equal. But at the same time, we need to implement reforms, making our education more inclusive and so on. So it's a two-way street.
So how us as culture people can include more, acceptance in our daily life? How do you think you as a politician or simply as a human, you would say the practice for us to be more listening rather than judging and, making the community work?
Yeah, well, I mean, let's come back to the liberal idea. I'm a strong believer in individual responsibility, and we are talking a lot about freedom, liberty, whatever word you would pick. But also, liberals think that this individual liberty or freedom may work only if we take our individual responsibility. And I think that we need that kind of responsibility. So it doesn't matter what are you doing in your life. You just have to, represent these values, respect each other, listen to each other, defend someone who is struggling, or help them. So this is how I, perceive our sort of socium, if I may say so. Anyway, so yeah, I think that everything begins with an individual. Family begins with an individual, and then community begins with a human being, and the city and the state. So I think this is quite an opposite approach that we are facing in mainstream politics now. Most of the governments and politicians nowadays, they see a state or society, let's put it in brackets, as a prior to individual. I don't believe in that.
Yeah, let's be the change we want to see in the country and in the world, for sure. Thank you so much for sharing your vision on Lithuania's future and explaining us how liberal values look like and parties look like in Lithuania.
Thank you for having me here, and thank you all the listeners, for listening to this podcast. And I hope we'll meet someday somewhere, not only on podcast, but also maybe somewhere in Lithuania or somewhere else.
This episode is an independent overview of Lithuanian politics and economy. We are not supported by any political party or business. We'll be aiming to give a voice for all people who are running for Lithuanian Parliament in upcoming elections. Thanks to everyone who helped us with our podcast recording, to Sean Donovan, who is our editor-in-chief, and our designer, Milda Sukyte. Don't forget to follow us on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Instagram, as well as check out our new website,